this video, we're going to pit the Motorola Atrix 4G against the Apple iPhone 4S, and we're going to pit them against each other spec for spec, feature for feature, so that you can see how they stack up against each other in a real-world situation. Now, the Motorola Atrix 4G has been on the market for about 8 months now. The Apple iPhone 4S has been on the market for just a couple of days. Now we're going to start this comparison just showing you how the devices stack up against each other physically. Now, as you can see, both devices are very similar in size. In height, they're almost identical. In width, the Apple iPhone 4S is a little bit thinner than the Motorola Atrix 4G, and that's mostly because the Motorola Atrix 4G has a larger screen, but we'll get into that later. Now, the thickness on the devices, the Apple iPhone 4S is a little bit thinner than the Motorola Atrix 4G. Now, as of the filming of this video, the Motorola Atrix 4G has the latest phone version of Android running on it, which is Android Gingerbread, and the iPhone 4S has the latest version of iOS running on it, which is iOS 5. The iPhone weighs 140 grams, and the Atrix weighs 135 grams, so the Atrix is a little bit lighter. The iPhone has a piece of Gorilla Glass on the front and a piece of Gorilla Glass on the back, and then of course you have your metal antenna in between that all the way around. The Atrix has a piece of Gorilla Glass on the front here, and then the rest of it is a plastic construction. Now, it's pretty much personal preference which build quality you prefer. You might find one more durable than the other. Being that this has a plastic back, I'm not as fearful of scratching it or breaking it. This has Gorilla Glass on the back, so it is strong glass, but I am a little bit more careful with this device. This has a great build quality, it has a good feel to it, but it does feel like you might have to take a little bit more care of it. So that's my first impression of the build quality of each phone here. Both devices have a front-facing camera on it, which is VGA quality. On the rear of both devices, you have the rear-facing camera, and on the Atrix, it's a 5-megapixel camera with a dual LED flash. On the back of the iPhone, you have an 8-megapixel camera with a one single LED flash on it. Both devices have a 3.5mm headphone jack on them, and you have your basic volume rocker here on the Motorola Atrix, and you have your volume buttons here on the Apple iPhone. You have your standard dock connector here on the Apple iPhone, and on the Atrix you actually have a mini USB and mini HDMI port out on the phone. So you do not have to buy a special adapter if you want to do HDMI out of the Motorola Atrix phone. Now, one feature I really like on the Motorola Atrix that's not really on any other phone that I know of is on the power button here, it's also a fingerprint scanner. So you just rub your finger across it and you can unlock your phone, which is really nice. Even the sequel to the Motorola Atrix, the Motorola Atrix 2, does not have it, which is disappointing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn both devices on, and we're going to do it at the same time and see which one turns on faster. So let's see if I can actually do this at the same time here. Just do it sideways for now here. And we're going to do 3, 2, 1. The iPhone 4S turned on faster, and the Atrix is still working. Alright, the Atrix is up and running now. Now the first thing you'll notice is that the screen on the Atrix is much larger than the screen on the iPhone. And that's because the Atrix screen is a 4-inch screen and the iPhone screen is a 3.5-inch screen. Now the display on the Motorola Atrix, you get a 540 by 960 pixel display. That gives you 275 pixels per inch. On the Apple iPhone 4S, the pixel per inch or pixel density is a little bit larger. You have 326 pixels per inch, and that's because you have the same amount of pixels height-wise, 960, but you have a larger number of pixels width-wise, which is 640, and the screen size is smaller, so all those pixels are in a smaller space, giving you a larger pixel density on the Apple iPhone. Now, of course, you have two different operating systems here, so you're going to get your features of separate home screens that you can pretty much put whatever you want on your Android phone here. So you can put widgets on there, you can put shortcuts to apps on there, and you have a dock at the bottom which you can put up to 4 different things on. On the iPhone, you have your typical iPhone screens, which is basically a list of all the apps you have on the device. And of course, if you swipe to the side over here, you can search your phone. Your dock down here includes 4 different icons. Now with iOS 5, Apple has brought its operating system up to par with the competition out there. On Android, you've always been able to put widgets on your phone. Well, with iOS, you have a version of widgets, which is in your drop-down menu here. Right here I have a stock widget, and here I have a weather widget. Widgets are handled differently on the Atrix. Obviously, you can put them anywhere you want on your home screens. And widgets have been available on Android since 2008. Also, something that's been available on Android since 2008 that's brand new to iOS is this drop-down menu. This has been available since the start on Android. Now, one of the new big things on the iPhone 4S is Siri, which is its voice control on the phone. Voice control has been available on Android for about 2 years now. It's implemented a little bit differently on both devices. Both platforms have their different way of approaching it. On the iPhone, you hold down the home button here until you get this little prompt here where Siri wants to help you.
I don't know what you mean by until you get this little prompt here where Siri wants to help you.
Okay, as you can see, it was recording what I was saying there, but basically you can do a lot of interesting things with Siri, asking the phone for information, asking the phone to set up an appointment, set an alarm for you. It's very interesting how they implement it over here. On Android, you have your search button here, and you can bring up a Google search, and you can do voice commands with that. Now, I'm going to actually have a separate video on Android voice controls versus iOS voice controls. So stay tuned for that. So just to give you a little sampling, I'm going to do a search on both devices right now and see what they bring up. What's the weather like in Tokyo, Japan?
Here's the forecast for Tokyo, Japan today through this Saturday.
So as you can see, they both bring up the same information here. The difference being is that Siri actually speaks back to you. When you do a search on an Android phone, it just brings up the information. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you the lock screen on both devices. Just bring it back down here. And the main reason I want to show you this is because there's a couple interesting features over here on the Apple iPhone 4. On your lock screen here on an Android phone, you basically just have your lock screen. You can actually mute the device from here. So if you slide to the left, you muted the device, and you bring it back and you take the mute off and put the sound on. On the Apple iPhone, you can, slide to unlock like you can do with the Android phone. But there's a couple of interesting things on here. You can actually hold down the home button and bring up Siri, or you can double tap the home button and bring up some controls here. And the control is your media control, so if you're playing music here, you can pause, play, fast forward, rewind, and then control the volume there. Also down here you can slide to unlock, or you can enter into the camera app right away. So you can just click on that and it opens up the camera, and that's actually the front-facing camera, so it's showing you my ceiling there. Now as far as the processor goes on both phones, you have a dual-core processor on both devices. They're actually both on the ARM Cortex-A9 architecture. You have a Tegra 2 dual-core 1 GHz processor in the Motorola Atrix, and you have an A5 dual-core processor over here in the Apple iPhone 4S. Now it's believed that the CPU in here is rated at 800 megahertz. This one is rated at 1 gigahertz. Again, like I say, you should never really compare hardware to hardware until you factor in the software, because hardware is only half of the equation. So this is why I pit the phones against each other, so you can see how they actually perform in a real-world situation. Now we know that Flash is available on Android, but not available on iOS. Now, if you want to compare apps between Android and iOS, the best thing to do is look on iTunes and check out all the things that are available there. And you can also check out the Android market online. You can check it from any web browser and see what they have available there. I'm not really going to get into the apps too much, as I consider that something that's personal preference. You are going to get a higher number of apps on iOS than you are going to get on Android. What apps are important to you is something for you to decide. So definitely check out both app stores and see what suits your needs better. I will be touching on things like that, but this video is mostly about how these two devices stack up to each other in real-world performance. Now, on the Android phone, it's more customizable because you can change the way it looks. A lot of Android phones out there are not going to look the same as far as the screen setup, because everybody's going to set up their screen differently. You can move all these widgets and these shortcuts to wherever you'd like. Pretty much the Apple iPhone has one basic look, which is all of your apps are right here at your fingertips, and you can actually change the background if you'd like. On an Android phone, you can change the background as well, but you also have live wallpapers, so you can change it to something that actually is moving. Let me change it to something Halloween inspired here, and just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, in case you're not familiar. Got a Halloween wallpaper there with some bats going. Now with Android here, you have your 4 characteristic buttons: your menu button, your home button, your back button, and your search button. On the Apple iPhone, you basically only have your one home button. Now if you want, you can actually double click on this and it gives you a list of all the apps you've used recently. So that's how multitasking is accomplished on this device. And also you have some media controls here and some volume controls here. Now what I want to do next is I want to compare the browsers on both devices. So I'm going to launch Safari on the Apple iPhone, and I'm going to launch the browser on the Atrix here. I'm going to try and do it at the same time. Okay. Now it took a little bit more time for the iPhone to bring that up, but that was my last search. Actually, it was a Siri search when I was talking to Siri, and that's why I brought this up. And this was the last thing that I brought up here, which was, what's the weather like in Tokyo, Japan? So just to be more definitive on this, what we're going to do is we're going to do a search, and we're going to search the same web page. I'm going to go to a website I don't go to ever, so I'm going to go to sprint.com. Now the one thing I like over here on the Apple iPhone is that you actually have a .com button. The .com button used to exist on Android, but I think they took it away with one of the updates, and I really don't know why. Probably because they have a lot of other things, a lot of other buttons to put in there, one of which is a language button, which I've covered in previous videos. But it is nice to have a .com button. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch both of these at the same time and see which one brings it up quicker. Now both devices are using Wi-Fi, just so you know. So it's a fair fight here. Looks like the Atrix was a hair faster. Let's go to a link here where it says phones and do that at the same time. And let's go to, let's try out the Motorola Photon here. Pretty close, pretty close. Let's see, let's go to the photo gallery. And it's displayed differently here, as you can see. Let's go to one of the pictures here. Okay, let's try another one. Pretty much spot on with each other here. Very close in performance here.